It was during a simple, almost casual Momenta podcast, of all places, that a voice familiar to millions touched something deeper than mere words. With his steady gaze and a tone that held both reverence and certainty, the acclaimed actor and filmmaker spoke, not about a film or a project, but about a relic, a piece of linen, ancient, controversial, sacred. His words weren't rehearsed. They came with the weight of someone who had seen more than most, someone who had searched, doubted, and then slowly begun to believe. "There are details on that cloth," he said softly, "that no one could have faked. Not back then, not now." The interviewer blinked. The room grew still. And for a moment, there was only the quiet hum of something unsaid but deeply felt. He wasn't trying to preach. There was no fire and brimstone urgency, no demand to believe, just a gentle certainty, like a man who had held a secret for too long and finally decided to share it. What he shared wasn't a theory, it was conviction, a conviction born not from blind faith but from evidence, from the weight of countless testimonies, scientific studies, and spiritual encounters that circled one mysterious centuries-old object, the Shroud of Turin. To some, it's just a piece of fabric. To others, it's the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. And for those who have dared to look closer, truly closer, the experience often leads to a silence filled not with doubt, but with awe. The man who spoke wasn't a theologian, nor a scientist, but he was someone who had immersed himself in the story of Christ through years of research, film production, and personal exploration. He had walked among scholars, historians, linguists, and believers. He had filmed scenes of faith and agony, love and betrayal, and in that process, he had come face to face with something that felt too precise, too detailed, too filled with divine fingerprints to be dismissed. He recounted stories, quiet conversations behind the cameras with researchers who had analyzed the shroud with modern technology. Stories about pollens found only in the ancient lands of Judea, about bloodstains consistent with crucifixion wounds, about impressions on the cloth resembling coins minted during the reign of Pontius Pilate. And then there were the whispers of light. Not metaphorical light, but a literal burst of radiation, unexplained by current science, which seemed to have burned the image into the fabric from within. A light that, according to some experts, could not have been produced by any natural or man-made process known in the ancient or modern world. These weren't tales from a movie script. They were reports, peer-reviewed studies, testimonies from skeptical scientists who walked into the investigation with raised eyebrows and left with their hearts strangely stirred. And that was only the beginning. Because the deeper you go into the shroud, the more you realize it's not just a relic, it's a mirror. It reflects the wounds of a man who suffered, but it also reflects something gentler, a love willing to endure unimaginable pain, a hope that defies death, a story written not in ink, but in blood and light. As he spoke, the actor's voice remained calm, but there was something behind his words that made listeners lean in, not to be convinced, but to understand. There was no push to believe, only a quiet invitation to see. And isn't that how truth often comes? Not like thunder, but like a whisper that stays with you long after the sound has faded. There's something about that cloth, something sacred, something timeless. It has survived fire, war, water, and doubt. It has been questioned, challenged, dismissed, yet it remains. Not untouched, but unbroken. Not hidden, but waiting. Waiting for hearts ready to see more than a symbol. Ready to feel what countless others have felt when standing before it. A presence, a tenderness, a love. And as this man's voice faded into the stillness of the room, one couldn't help but wonder if this cloth truly holds the imprint of the divine. What else might it hold? What story is waiting to be told in the next thread of truth? If this touched something in you, I lovingly invite you to become part of our community. Click like and subscribe to this channel. It's a small act that helps us continue sharing messages of light, truth, and hope. And if you feel moved, comment below with your first name and the city you're watching from, so we can send a special greeting to you in our next video. You're not just watching, you're part of something greater. There are things the heart recognizes before the mind can explain them. And when it comes to the Shroud of Turin, that recognition often begins with a quiet gasp of stillness in the solas if something ancient and sacred has just brushed against you. This isn't just about history or science, it's about presence. The image on the cloth is faint, yet unshakably powerful. A man lying as if asleep, but marked by unimaginable suffering. His wounds are not random, they follow a story known by billions. Pierced wrists, a gash on the side, traces of thorn-shaped punctures on the forehead, lash marks across the back, dust on the knees, blood on the brow. Every detail whispers the same name. And it's not fear that rises when we see it, it's tenderness. Because behind each mark is love. A love willing to endure, not to prove power, but to offer mercy. Decades of research have been poured into the study of this cloth. And with every microscope, every photograph, every test, one truth seems to echo louder. Whoever this man was, he suffered deeply. And whoever he was, his story aligns point by point with that of Jesus of Nazareth. Yet, what's even more astonishing isn't just what's visible, but what's invisible. There is no pigment on the cloth, no ink, no paint. The image was not drawn or brushed, it is a negative image burned into the fibers at a microscopic level. Modern science still cannot replicate this effect, and so researchers are left with questions that begin to sound like prayers. What force, what energy, what moment of unimaginable power could have created an image like this? As investigations unfolded, another discovery emerged that doesn't just touch the mind, but the heart. The blood type found on the shroud is AB+, a rare type also found in various Eucharistic miracles, including the one in Lanciano, Italy, where consecrated bread and wine were said to transform into human flesh and blood, and in both cases, the tissue points to a man from the Middle East. The same region, the same blood, the same love. It's as if these separate miracles, separated by time and space, are reaching toward one anotherikos from heaven trying to meet us here on earth. And the cloth continues to speak, not loudly, but steadily, through science, through mystery, and most of all, through a story of surrender. There is pollen embedded in the fibers of the shroud pollen from flowers that grew only in ancient Judea, some of which no longer exist. These aren't decorative details. They're botanical fingerprints from a time long past. Pollen grains so specific they point directly to the environment Jesus walked in. Then come the coins. Upon close inspection of the area around the eyes, markings were discovered that resemble Roman coins used during the reign of Pontius Pilate. According to Jewish burial customs, coins were placed over the eyes of the deceased as a sign of honor and closure. But how would anyone in the Middle Ages, centuries before the discovery of these customs or these coins, know to replicate such specific, intimate details? They wouldn't. That's the point. What we're seeing is not human invention, it's divine preservation. And in that realization, something begins to shift in us. We're no longer just observers of a relic. We become witnesses to a love story carved in blood and light. A story not meant to convince us with fear, but to call us with compassion. Because that's what love does. It marks, it endures, it remembers, and it waits. And if this cloth truly bears the image of a moment when heaven touched earth, what might happen when our hearts choose to touch back? If this message moved your heart, we warmly invite you to join our beautiful community by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Here, we walk together in light, in hope, and in faith. And if you believe in the power of love that heals, type Amen in the comments to receive blessings into your life. Don't forget to share the name of your city in the comments as well. We want to lift you up in our prayers and send special blessings to your home and your heart. You're not alone, you're deeply loved. There are discoveries that fade with time, and then those that grow louder the deeper we look. The Shroud of Turin belongs to the second kind. It has endured centuries of scrutiny, disbelief, devotion, and even fire. Yet, the more we try to explain it, the more it seems to whisper back, not with answers, but with deeper questions. Not with facts alone, but with a sense of sacredness that refuses to be ignored. It is not just a cloth. It is a canvas of time, a relic woven not just with threads, but with echoes of a moment where suffering met glory. Modern science has taken the shroud through every test imaginable. Microscopic analysis, infrared photography, 3D imaging, chemical studies, carbon dating, and despite all this, it remains an object suspended between worlds anchored in history, yet infused with something that feels eternal. The texture of the linen is unmistakably consistent with the weaving style of the 1st century, something remarkably rare in Western Europe during the medieval period. This already raised eyebrows. But it was just the beginning. Scientists began to detect traces of dust and pollen deeply embedded in the fibers. These particles, though invisible to the naked eye, became voices of their own. Over 50 types of pollen were identified, many of which belong to plants that grow exclusively in the region of Jerusalem and, more specifically, only during the spring. The season of Passover, the season of the crucifixion. The pattern was too precise to be dismissed. And then came the forensic detail harsh, yet heartbreakingly human. A swollen cheekbone, a broken nose, signs of blows to the face, lash marks across the back over 100, possibly from a Roman flagrum, with bits of bone and metal woven into the leather to tear the skin. Bloodstains on the head forming a circle, not from a traditional crown, but from a crown of thorns pressed down in cruelty and mockery. Wounds in the wrists and feet placed precisely where modern medicine confirms the nails would have needed to go to support a man's weight during crucifixion, and a gaping wound on the right side of the chest just beneath the ribcage, consistent with a Roman spear. Each of these marks corresponds directly to the biblical description of the Passion of Christ. But perhaps most stirring is this: the blood is not smudged, as it would be if someone had painted it. It is soaked, deeply absorbed into the cloth, forming real serum rings and clotting pattern. In other words, this was not painted blood, it was shed blood. And even more mysteriously, the cloth reveals an image that is three-dimensional. When put under specialized scanners, it forms a topographic map of a human body. No photograph, no painting, ancient or modern, has ever replicated this effect. It's as if the image was burned into the cloth by a burst of energy radiating from within the body itself. Scientists don't fully understand how this could happen, but they agree it was not made by hand. It was not created by brush or dye. It was impressed by something we cannot yet explain. Some suggest it was light, a flash, others radiation. But more than one physicist has quietly admitted, whatever did this, it came from something beyond our world. These findings have moved not only believers, but also skeptics, some of whom entered the study with firm doubt and left with trembling hands and softened hearts. Because you can study numbers and fibers and blood patterns, but when you start to feel the love behind each wound, you're no longer just a scientist, you're a witness. And as more experts stepped back from the data, many began to say something they never expected to say. This may not just be history, this may be a miracle. And if it is, if this cloth really holds a record of the moment divinity touched death, then what might happen when we allow that same light to touch our lives? If this story is awakening something in your heart, we'd love for you to become part of our community of light and reflection. Click like to let us know you're with us on this journey, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep exploring these sacred truths together. We're not just viewers, we're pilgrims walking side by side. Your presence here faz toda a differenza. Welcome home. There are objects in this world that we understand with our minds, and then there are those that we feel with something far deeper. The Shroud of Turin belongs to the second Kenden artifact that doesn't just exist, but breathes, pulses, and reaches beyond time to touch the soul. It has withstood not just centuries of controversy, but the elements themselves. Fires, floods, neglect, even deliberate attempts to damage or discredit it. Yet, the image remains, untouched by time, untamed by doubt. Perhaps that is its greatest mystery. It refuses to vanish. In the 16th century, a fire nearly consumed it. The silver of its reliquary melted and poured onto the cloth. In the chaos, drops of molten metal should have destroyed the image, but they didn't. The fabric burned around the edges, but the face, the body, they remained, as if protected by something unseen. In another incident, it was boiled in oil. The test was cruel. Would the image fade if exposed to scalding heat? It didn't. Not even the intensity of boiling oil could erase the faint, graceful outline of the man on the cloth. Over and over again, what should have been destroyed survives. Why? And more than Thatho? When it was first photographed in 1898, something unimaginable happened. A man named Secondo Pia took the first known negative image of the shroud, and when he developed the plate, he staggered back in awe, because the negative image revealed details that were invisible to the naked eye. The face became clearer, the wounds more defined, the symmetry more perfect. It was not just an image, it was a revelation. The world was stunned. What had seemed like a faded ghost on linen now stared back with the face of suffering and serenity. In the age before modern imaging, before digital manipulation, before special effects, a 14-foot piece of cloth had just demonstrated the impossible. It held a perfect photographic negative, centuries before photography was ever invented. But this wasn't just a curiosity, it was a message. A message encoded not in ink or color, but in light itself. What kind of light burns an image into linen fibers without destroying them? What kind of light contains depth anew to create a 3D rendering? What kind of light bursts forth from a lifeless body with such force that it leaves behind an eternal mark? Many scientists, despite their expertise, have whispered a single word to describe it: Resurrection, not as a metaphor, not as poetry, but as an event, a singularity. A moment when divine energy collided with the fabric of our world. The man on the shroud does not appear frozen in agony. His eyes are closed, his body at peace. The violence is there, but so is the stillness, the surrender, the quiet victory of one who has passed through pain and come out radiant. The image tells us, yes, he suffered, but he also transcended. And what greater hope could we carry than this? That beyond our wounds, there is light. That beyond our crosses, there is resurrection. That even when all seems lost, heaven finds a way to touch earth and leave its imprint. We don't know everything about the shroud. We may never know, but perhaps we're not meant to solve it. Perhaps we're meant to stand before it, to feel its silence, and let it speak to the part of us that's forgotten how to believe. Because if this cloth really caught the moment light triumphed over darkness, then the story it tells is still unfolding, maybe even inside of us. Ikka. If this touched your spirit, we gently invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. You are part of a growing family, a community of seekers who walk together in love and faith. And if your heart feels called, type MM in the comments to welcome blessings into your life. Don't forget to share the city you live in. We want to mention your name in our prayers and send warm spiritual light to you and your home. Your presence matters, and your journey is sacred. Not every transformation happens in a cathedral. Some happen under microscopes, in sterile labs, in the hearts of scientists who came searching for facts and found something they couldn't explain. It's easy to imagine that belief is reserved for the faithful alone, that scientists, researchers, and skeptics live in a separate world ruled only by what can be measured, tested, and verified. But the story of the Shroud of Turin reveals a beautiful, often overlooked truth. Even the most rational minds can be moved by wonder. The team that investigated the shroud in one of the most comprehensive projects ever conducted was called Stirp the Shroud of Turin Research Project. It was not made up of priests or monks. It was formed by experts in fields like nuclear physics, chemistry, photography, medicine, and forensic science, including people who had worked with organizations like NASA. Many of them arrived skeptical. They expected to find a clever forgery or a simple explanation hidden under centuries of myth. They believed they would disprove what millions had hoped for, but what they found instead was silence. A silence that came not from the absence of evidence, but from the presence of something too real, too perfect, and too unexplainable to ignore. They discovered that the image on the shroud had no brushstrokes, no pigment, no dye anything that would indicate human creation. The blood was real human blood, type AB, rich with both red cells and serum rings. The image was not just two-dimensional. It had encoded depth information. That meant it could be digitally lifted into a 3D form, something no artwork has ever achieved, ancient or modern. More than 40 scientists from across the globe participated, and at the end of their years-long research, a startling number of the months indifferent or unbelieving admitted they had been changed. Some found themselves praying for the first time in years. Others wept quietly while analyzing fibers and photographs. Many simply said, "We don't have the tools to explain this." And a few braver than most said aloud what their hearts had already known. This is not just a relic, it's a witness. Among them was Dr. August Exeta, a medical researcher who went so far as to inject himself with a radioactive isotope to replicate a theory that the image on the shroud had been formed by a sudden, radiant burst of energy from within the body. His own body was scanned afterward, and remarkably, the results mirrored the image on the cloth. It was as if the shroud had captured not the moment of death, but something beyond it, a transition, a transformation, a resurrection. And while science may struggle to name it, the soul already knows what it is. The testimonies don't end in labs. Historians have spoken about coins over the eyes, minted under Pontius Pilate, discovered in precise alignment with ancient Jewish burial customs. Linguists have translated inscriptions. Botanists have confirmed the regional presence of extinct flowers. And physicians have matched the anatomical accuracy of the wounds to the gospel accounts of Christ's crucifixion with chilling precision. But beyond all this, beyond every fact and measurement, is something greater. The quiet conversion of the heart. The shroud doesn't demand belief. It doesn't shout or persuade. It simply stands as it has always stood, silent, wounded, radiant. And those who approach it with humility often leave changed. Not because they were convinced, but because they were moved. Because there, before a fragile piece of linen, they encountered something that felt like truth. Not the kind written in textbooks, but the kind written in tears, in awe, in love. And if this truth has been carried through fire, through doubt, through time itself, what else might it still be trying to reach? Who else might it still be calling? If this touched your heart in any way, we lovingly invite you to walk with us. Click like to support this message and subscribe to our channel. You are more than a viewer. You are part of a family that grows in light, faith, and truth together. We believe that this journey is better when shared, and your presence here is a true blessing. The story of the Shroud of Turin is not one trapped in the past. It is a living testimonious sacred echo that continues to resonate in the hearts of those who dare to look beyond what the eyes can see. While some artifacts speak of kingdoms lost and civilizations gone, this one speaks of something that never ended: hope. From the moment the cloth was first revealed to the public, it stirred something timeless. People didn't just come to observe it, they came to weep, to pray, to kneel. And over the centuries, that quiet reverence only grew. Its journey through history was not smooth or celebrated. For centuries, the shroud was kept in secret, hidden from those who might destroy it, passed from hand to hand like a treasure of unspeakable value. It surfaced in France in the 14th century, then found its permanent home in Turin, Italy, where it has been protected, studied, and venerated ever since. And still it endures. Surviving 2 fires, exposed to water, oil, even the efforts of skeptics, yet the image remained, untouched in its mystery. Why does it survive? Not just physically, but spiritually? Perhaps because its message is not meant for just one generation. Perhaps because it holds the blueprint of redemption, and redemption is something every soul longs for. Even the Church, cautious in its approach, has encouraged free inquiry. Popes have looked upon it not as a relic to worship, but as a sign to ponder. Pope John Paul II, deeply moved by it, once said, "The shroud is a mirror of the gospel." And what a mirror it is! When we gaze into it, we don't just see a body, we see a moment where sorrow met grace, where agony gave birth to salvation, where the worst of human cruelty collided with the highest form of divine mercy. That's why, despite the centuries and the debates, the shroud continues to breathe life into faith. Because faith is not blind. It is the courage to see what others dismiss. It is the strength to believe, not in spite of the pain, but because of what the pain gave birth towards erection. The man wrapped in that cloth bore the weight of every sin, every fear, every wound this world has ever known. And yet the image we see is not of a broken man, it is of a man who endured and overcame. There's no hatred in that face, no bitterness in those closed eyes. Only peace, only stillness, only love. It's no wonder that even those who struggle with belief find themselves drawn in, because this isn't just about theology or history, it's about something that lives inside each of us. The longing to be known, to be forgiven, to be held by something greater than ourselves. And that longing somehow finds its answer in a centuries-old piece of linen. So we return, again and again, not just with curiosity, but with hope. Hope that suffering has meaning. Hope that love outlasts death. Hope that what was once laid in a tomb did not stay there, but rose, radiant and whole. And maybe, just maybe, that same hope can rise in us too. If you felt a stirring in your spirit while walking through this story, we warmly invite you to continue with us. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. You're not just following content, you're joining a community that walks in faith, love, and light. Here, no one walks alone. Together, we seek truth and find beauty in every step. Some truths arrive not with thunder, but with a whisper. The Shroud of Turin has never shouted. It has never forced belief. It simply exists softly, humbly inviting each soul to draw near and listen with the heart. It doesn't ask for blind devotion. It asks only that we look. Look not only with our eyes, but with the part of us that still remembers how to feel wonder. Through every chapter of this journey, from scientific analysis to historical detail, from the blood-soaked fibers to the radiant image imprinted by an unexplainable light, we have not merely examined an artifact. We have stood at the edge of something sacred. And perhaps that's what makes the shroud so extraordinary. It reminds us that faith is not the opposite of reason. Faith is the courage to walk where reason ends and love begins. We've seen how scientists entered laboratories as skeptics and left as witnesses. We've seen how forgotten pollen and ancient coins told the same story written in the Gospels. We've seen how the silent cloth bore not just the marks of death, but the unmistakable signs of resurrection. But above all, we've seen this. In every detail, every wound, every thread, there is love. Love that does not end at the grave. Love that bears wounds not for revenge, but for redemption. Love that survives fire, time, and doubt so it can reach you, here, now. And this love is not trapped in the past. It's alive. It's reaching for you in quiet moments, in unanswered prayers, in the hope that refuses to die in your chest even after everything. The shroud is not an object to worship, it's a sign of gift, a reminder that you are known, that your pain matters, that you are not alone. It tells us what we already hoped was true. That light has the last word, that death is not the end, and that the one who suffered did so, not out of obligation, but out of love. Love for you. So as this chapter closes, a question remains. Not about cloth or carbon or chemistry, but about the heart. What will you do with the love that has just reached you? Will you carry it forward? Will you allow it to heal what hurts? Will you dare to believe that something divine has always been by your side? We hope you will, because this is not the end. This is only the beginning of a deeper journey, one that leads not to answers, but to peace. Not to rules, but to relationship. Not to fear, but to faith. And if you feel that light rising inside you now, then hold on to it. Let it grow. Let it guide you home. Thank you for walking with us. You are loved. You are seen. You are part of this sacred story. If this message touched your spirit, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Here, we walk together in grace and truth, a community of hearts seeking light in a world that so desperately needs it. Type AMEM in the comments to welcome divine blessings over your life. And don't forget to share the city you live in. We want to pray for you, send love to your home, and mention you in our next blessing. You are never forgotten. And now, if you wish to continue this journey of light, just click the next video that's appearing on your screen. It holds a revelation that may change everything. It's filled with truth, comfort, and a message made just for you. We'll meet you there. Until then, Amen.